here today with Dr. Anna Samuel, graduate of Princeton and Notre Dame, first director of Witherspoon Institute, and one of the co-founders of Canavox. Anna, why do you do what you do?
Why do I do what I do? Well, what specific thing would you like me to talk about? I do a lot of things. I wear many hats.
I suppose the main one is Canavox, right? So let's start with that one.
All right. Well, I wouldn't say that's the main one. I mean, I would say the main hat I wear
Really?
is my wife and motherhood hat. That's the main hat I wear. And so I would say that Canavox is a side job, a side gig I do but it's integrated into my larger family life. So with that caveat, yes, I am the academic director of Canavox. It is something I started out of the Witherspoon Institute in my capacity as research scholar at Witherspoon in 2013. And it was born largely out of the frustrations going on in the marriage movement at the time and the sort of tension I felt between my motherhood life, my mommy life as a mother of young children then, and my academic life as a scholar in touch with lots of other scholars working on the defense of marriage in the public square. And it was this desire to bridge these two worlds and get really great mothers and fathers and parents in touch with the latest academic research available in defense of marriage, because I could tell that the average person was not in touch with all this amazing scholarship that was being done to defend marriage. And so that's how Canavox really started, out of this frustration I was feeling and the desire to fix it.
Well, one thing that I like about the way you present things is it's very optimistic and encouraging, which for me is difficult mindset to hold, because it seems like we've totally lost the marriage battle. It's not just same-sex marriage, but it's also just no-fault divorce.
Yeah.
Am I wrong about that? In fact, I've even heard someone say, who I really respect, who's a professor, that marriage does not exist in the U.S. Legally, we are not free to get married, because what marriage is insoluble bond for life, and we're not legally allowed to do that. So what would you respond to that?
Well, first of all, I'm glad you picked up on the optimism, because Canavox is an optimistic organization. We're very cheerful. Our work is not fear-mongering. It's not alarmist. It doesn't dwell on the negative. And so I find the comment by the person you just sort of paraphrased to be kind of typical of very academic, ivory tower, many disgruntled people that have, done a lot of great work. There are many heroes who've been fighting the marriage fight for a long time, and they're very frustrated. But I don't see it that way. I do agree with you that marriage is, there has been a great erosion of the value of marriage in our country. And you are quite right to focus on divorce, as I think that's the scourge in our country. Although same-sex marriage is one of the latest things that has been very alarming. Same-sex marriage has posed a greater, let's say, threat to the meaning of marriage, but divorce has been a far greater threat to the practice of marriage. I would say that divorce, that since the 1970s, has truly paved the way for the deconstruction of marriage. And so I think that's where the focus should be, although it's very informative to think about what same-sex, quote-unquote, marriage even is, according to our adversaries, because it's very fruitful to think about that to better understand what we're doing when we say we are truly married. I do not think that I do think you can still get married in this country, because marriage is an expression of the natural law. My vision is very natural law based. We can talk about what natural law is, but marriage is alive and well. It is alive and well. If you look around you, if you put away the newspaper, if you look at ordinary men and women struggling on the ground to keep their marriages alive, to create communities of marriages around them, to form networks of friendships who are trying to defend marriage, as we do at Canavox, you see there are so many good people, so many heroic, wonderful people rising up to the challenge of our time, and absolutely showing people, inspiring people, educating others, and forming great families. So I really, although I don't want to have a Pollyanna kind of outlook, things are very hard. There is a great deal of error in our culture right now. I also think we have to look at the great good that is also going on, which I see more of on an everyday basis than I see the great harms and misinformation.
Can you share with us some success stories? If we want to be more encouraged and optimistic, give us some examples of that.
Every success story is going to revolve around friendship. It's the friendship between the married couple. First of all, the marriages that, my favorite definition of marriage is not an academic one. I can give you the academic the proper natural law definition of marriage. We can talk about that too. But my favorite definition of marriage at a kind of personal first-person point of view is two people who refuse to give up on each other. So marriage is just two people who refuse to give up. Two broken people who refuse to give up on each other. That is what marriage is in the lived experience, okay? So whenever I see married couples who refuse to give up on each other despite their tremendous brokenness and their choice to really cultivate a friendship with each other, that spills over into friendships with their children, okay? A lot of people will say it's not possible to have a friendship with your child. I disagree. I think it is not only possible, but it is absolutely necessary to have a friendship with your child, especially in this day and age. It's not going to be necessary a friendship of equals, all right? Parent-child friendship is its own distinct kind of friendship. It's a friendship based on mentorship and unconditional love, especially from the parent to the child. But it is really important, and I think these are small heroic victories when parents truly sacrificially give themselves in friendship to their children to educate and mentor and guide them. And then friendships with our friends and neighbors, especially friendships with people who think very differently from us. I consider it to be a victory and an ordinary heroic thing for a family member to stand for the truth of what marriage is in love and kindness to extended friends and family members who are maybe involved in same-sex relationships or lobbying for another position. And that when that family comes together, despite their differences, to not give up on each other, to remain faithful to their friendship and their family bonds, despite their brokenness and despite their great differences, I consider that to be extraordinarily heroic and beautiful and healing and what we need to be happening in our families so that this spills out to our neighborhoods and our towns and our cities and ultimately our nation.
So when you're talking about witnessing to the truth of marriage while also developing friendship with those who disagree, where is the line that we cannot cross that would result in violating the truth?
So marriage is... Okay, so now let's talk about the proper, philosophical definition of marriage. Okay, you have to understand exactly what marriage is, and also what sexual integrity is. Okay, it's not simply about marriage, it's also about the broader value of sexual integrity generally, so that you know where the lines are. So marriage is a comprehensive union between a man and a woman. That little philosophical formula is like a multivitamin. It packs a punch. There is a lot in those few words. Okay, so if you can memorize, marriage is a comprehensive union between a man and a woman. You have the basic collapsed form of what marriage is. So what do we mean by a comprehensive union? Okay, it means a union between a man and a woman at all levels of their being. So mind, will, emotion, heart, and very importantly, bodies. Okay, marriage is the union and the only union. It's the relationship and the only relationship on this earth in which we can have an organic bodily union with another human being. That is the quality that makes marriage distinct from every other human relationship on earth. And when you can understand what an organic bodily union means, which is a particular kind of union of organs. When we say organic bodily union, we're not talking about organic like Whole Foods it is those things too. It's not artificial. There's no artificial stuff in that kind of bodily union. But what philosophers mean by an organic bodily union is a union of organs, right? The reproductive system is the only system in our bodies that is incomplete. You have a complete digestive system. I have a complete respiratory system, but no human being has a complete reproductive system. It's this one weird system we have in our body that requires another person of the opposite sex to complete. All right. This is all from a philosophical, biological point of view. So an organic bodily union means two organs come together to create one single unified reproductive capacity. All right. One organic union. All right. And that's what makes marriage distinct. And that's why from Black laws, from the oldest of times, you've had to have a marriage consummated, this union of two bodies to take place in order for there to be a real marriage. So once you have these ideas clear, you can say, okay, two men or two women or a threesome of whatever cannot create an organic bodily union. So that's where we draw the line. All right. You also have to understand that this comprehensive union means that because it's comprehensive, it means that it's total. In other words, it's exclusive. I'm giving only myself to one other person. It's exclusive through time as well. It's lifelong or permanent. So that is what marriage is from a philosophical point of view. So when you truly understand what this is, and that's what we encourage people to do in our Canavox groups, to really dive into some of this philosophy and some of the personal stories and the alternative views of alternative definitions of marriage. When people understand what this is, it becomes much easier for them to say, well, I believe you can have a great friendship. I believe, Janie and Sally can have a wonderful friendship. I believe that they can care for each other and be committed to each other. And I believe they can have lots of shared goods and values and do wonderful things as great friends. But they cannot have a marriage. And so I cannot pretend or say anything or act in a way that behaves as if I am treating them like a married couple. You see? So once you understand what marriage is, you align all your thoughts, your words, your actions to reflect that objective truth. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah. And I even would take it a step further that one had the brilliance of the definition that Sharif Gurgis provides in the What is Marriage article and subsequent book. If I remember correctly, he emphasizes the point of comprehensive union as the essence, and that the man between a man and a woman is simply just a consequence of that, right? So that you can only have a comprehensive union, including the organic bodily union between a man and a woman. So we don't even have to include man and woman in the definition, because that's actually just a property. It's like an essential characteristic of the definition.
Yes. I do want to say, though, I want to give, that is Sharif Gurgis did author that, but don't forget, too, that Robert George and Ryan Anderson were also co-authors. I just want to give all three authors their due credit.
Yes, like a good academic, academic.
Right. Yes.
Well, I think that the distinction in the definition is important because it shows that when we're philosophically arguing for the definition of marriage, we're not presupposing it's between a man and a woman, because then that would seem like we're just like jumping the gun if we're trying to explain why same-sex marriage is not marriage. Anyways, maybe it's a subtle point. But
just saying, I don't know that I would agree with you on that. There's different schools of natural law there, and I don't want to get into the intramural fights about new natural law, old natural, and all of that. But I do think that this understanding of marriage flows. Ground zero for all of this is the nature of the human person. Before we can even talk about what marriage even is, you have to understand what a human being is, right? And if we start thinking about what Homo sapiens is as a species, you will inevitably come to the conclusion that we are sexed. We are sexed beings, right? And so I do think that philosophically, what comes first is the philosophical anthropology, is the definition of man and woman. Like, what is a man? What is a woman? And from there, we can start to think about marriage. So I do think that I think I might, if you want to, I think I would quibble with you on that particular point. I do think that, I wouldn't go about it. And I can imagine some philosophers would go about it in a more pre-sexual way, as thinking about marriage from a pre-sexual or agnostic on the sexual question. But that's not the way I would go about it. I would go about it the other way around.
Well, I'll take your word for it, because you thought about this much more than I have. Now, I think regardless, the view that you laid out, which I agree with broadly, it's very unpopular in some circles, shall we say. What's it been like just espousing this view? And why wouldn't your life be so much simpler if you just didn't say anything about it and just thought about it in your mind, but didn't actually say it out loud?
My gosh, maybe for some people it would be, but I think I would burst. When you know the truth of something and you see the earth-shattering magnificence of marriage, when you see that marriage is a gift of our common humanity, the thing that makes us have every other gift, after life itself, right? The marriage of our parents, the union of our parents gives us life. And the comprehensive union of a man and woman provides society with so many untold gifts that once you understand that truth, and again, at Canavox, that's what we help people to see. We help you to see the data. We help you to see all the personal stories and everything. Why marriage is such a magnificent gift to humanity. You cannot hold it in. My life would have been miserable if I had to hold this in. And that's why I started Canavox, really. And yes, it makes some conversations a little bit uncomfortable. But here's the thing. If you really love the people around you, all right, and you seek what is best for them, you will find creative ways to message about this gently, steadfastly, without backing down, pointing to the better way, without criticizing people, simply stating your opinion and just letting people sort of grapple with. You're planting seeds of truth gently, right? I don't believe in debating your neighbor or hitting your good friend over the head with these ideas. I mean, you and I are talking about this freely on a podcast because, this is one particular forum. But I would never speak this way to my beloved sister-in-law, who's much more liberal than I am and disagrees with me on all these issues. I would never talk this way to her about all these things, right? We have to practice prudence and love and kindness and respect other people's freedom to figure these things out, right? One of my favorite metaphors from the history of philosophy is Socrates always called himself a midwife. I don't know, Johann, if you know what a midwife is. I imagine you know what a midwife is, but it's the woman that helps at a birth to give birth to somebody else's child. And the beautiful thing about Socrates calling himself a midwife is that he liked to believe that he was helping other people give birth to their own great ideas. So he was just there to facilitate somebody else's epiphany. Okay. He would sort of egg people on and play devil's advocate and ask people to explain themselves and clarify. And he was always exceedingly polite. But what he was trying to do is to help people think things through kindly. Some people found it annoying. They also called him a gadfly, right? They also called him something like a horsefly, like he was always annoying people. But ultimately, I do think we all need to be like Socrates in this way, to be like midwives, helping people think things through, just gently tapping people with ideas that will give them pause so that in the quiet of their hearts, they will start to question their presumptions and maybe consider another way of thinking.
Yeah, it's a great image. It's really inclusive of Socrates to think of himself as a midwife. Didn't realize he was so progressive, but I like that. I like that image.
Yeah.
But aren't you afraid of accidentally hurting people's feelings?
Am I afraid of that? I know
it could be really triggering what you say.
Yeah. I mean, look, I've experienced everything, in the spectrum from hate mail. I mean, hate mail even arriving to my mailbox. I mean, not even just mailbox. I mean, not even your inbox. I mean, my physical mailbox outside my house. I've gotten hate mail from California. I live in New Jersey. I've experienced things like that. I've experienced people writing these articles about me online that are just so evil. Like they present me as like the most evil person. Those things, although they sting in the moment, those things don't really hurt as much as when it's a dear friend who feels extremely hurt by something that you're doing, or a close friend or neighbor. I've had people that I love in my neighborhood, good neighbors, who once they realized what I did, I could experience the cooling off of the relationship. Now, the good news is that it was always temporary. It has always been temporary. And by temporary, I mean a year or two. So I judge temporariness in maybe a longer scheme. But after a few years of continued politeness and goodwill and showing that I do respect and love them in other ways, over time, things begin to defrost and the relationship comes back on better footing. Maybe it wasn't as chummy or happy-go-lucky as it was before, but the relationship does return. And I think on better footing, because this person was given the opportunity to now learn to respect somebody else's point of view on a matter. And while they may have been very angry in the beginning, they cooled off. And in their hearts, they learned to respect someone else's position and open their hearts to at least a minimal degree of friendship with somebody who thinks differently. And then both of us exerting ourselves to be kind and respectful despite our very serious differences of opinion on these issues. So I consider that a win. I mean, okay, maybe they still disagree with me on marriage, but golly, I mean, we're now like saying hello again and I walk the dog and they make eye contact with me and we're not having this Cold War like we were a few years ago. And I consider that a real gain. And I pray for them. I'm a person of faith and I pray for them. And I hope they'll see that I desire what is good for them. So that's happened many times in my life. And so I suppose I no longer fear it because, I did used to fear it. I used to be quite a people pleaser growing up. I mean, it was, this is the last thing I ever thought I would be doing as an adult. I was always the kind of person who wanted to keep the peace, didn't want to get involved in like contentious things, especially as a young child. As I got older and I grew, I became better forms and ideas. I became more passionate. And then I went a little bit too far in the debater's mindset. And I got burned many times being too strong and too blunt with people about what I was understanding was the philosophical truth of things. And now, now in my 40s, I'm finally learning some prudence and wisdom. I think motherhood does that to you as well. Parenthood forces you to learn how to say things more patient and gently and kindly because you realize it backfires otherwise. So I think now I don't fear it because like so many life experiences have shown me that in the end, this is a much better way to deal with people honestly and truthfully, rather than like not being true to what you believe or like hiding what you think and feeling like you're going to explode or feeling all this cognitive dissonance. And that's no way to live. You have to find a way to be authentically true to yourself and what you believe is the truth, and then do it with the utmost kindness. And then if somebody explodes in your face, well, you did everything you could. Give it time, continue to be kind, and you will see in the long term, it will pay off. It will pay off.
A lot of people believe what you believe, but they don't express it. Why is it that you are willing to express it and most people, vast majority, are not? Probably out of fear.
Yeah. I don't know that I know the answer to that. I will say that people have different personality types, different temperaments, and we need to respect, I think, people's different temperaments. I see this in my own kids. My kids now know that I fight for marriage and all this. Some of my kids are little culture warriors. They can't wait to get out there and they want to practice debating around the kitchen table. And I'm like, I love it, right? It's like flashcard time. Okay, what would you say if this? And what would you say if that? Others of my kids do not want to rock the boat.
The oldest, if you don't mind me asking.
So my kids are 10 to 20 right now. So we have 6 kids and they were each born 2 years apart. So the eldest is 20 and the little one is 10. And we have all personality types among our kids. I mean, my husband likes to be out of the limelight. My husband does not like to be out like talking about this stuff at all. So this difference in temperament begins really in our marriage. And then my children, they have very different personality types. And so I learned that this is really a temperamental thing. Now, just because you don't have a culture warrior personality doesn't mean you can't do a great deal of good. Okay. Even my quietest children, the ones that don't want to rock the boat, the ones that are much more keen on having lots of friends with lots of different beliefs and respecting everybody's freedom of opinion, which, by the way, all of us do. But the kids that don't want to be out there talking about this all the time, like I do, they can still do a great deal of good. All right. The way I say to them is like, look, you don't have to be out there. Maybe you can do other things like defend other people's freedom to speak freely. Maybe you're in class and somebody starts saying they're pro-life and the whole class is ganging up on them. Maybe you can be like, hey guys, I think we should respect her freedom to say what she believes about life. This is a more modest way to get involved so that you are helping to create a culture of free and open opinion and discussion, right? Or, whatever, you can remain more quiet and maybe have more one-on-one conversations with somebody when the time comes. You don't have to be always on the issue the way some other people want to be. That's fine. We respect people's differences of opinion or differences of temperament. But I do think everybody is called to courage. I do think whatever your temperament is, you do need to be pushing yourself. Cross that threshold of courage because it is a threshold. We all have to cross it. I had to cross it. I remember the moment, my boss at the Witherspoon Institute came to me and said, would you be willing to not work anymore on Montesquieu and the natural law philosophy you've been working on, which is a nice, safe topic. I mean, it wasn't that safe, but I was working on a pretty respectable, topic in the philosophy of Montesquieu. And instead help us promote the work of Dr. Mark Brugneris, who just did some of the social science studies on child outcomes of children in same-sex households. And I was like, what? I'll never forget that day because, we have another colleague who had just received threats on his life a few months earlier for defending marriage. This was way before the Supreme Court case on same-sex marriage and other things. And those were very, very hostile times. And I'll never forget the conversation where this boss of mine was like, would you be willing to help with this project that nobody else wants to touch? And I felt like I had to cross the threshold. I had to come out, I had to publicly be ready to come out against the redefinition of marriage based on a study that I knew was going to be extremely controversial. It was. That study became national headlines. And so I had to really think about the reason I became motivated can be summed up by this French term, noblesse, oblige. I don't know if you've heard this, noblesse, oblige, Johann, but I don't know even how to translate it properly in English. But basically, people who have been given a lot have a special responsibility to give back. And I have always felt like I have been extraordinarily privileged in my family upbringing, in the fact that I had a mother and a father, in my faith, in my education. I mean, the fact that I studied with so many world-class scholars of natural law at Princeton and then at Notre Dame. I mean, I received a front row education into some of the best scholarship there is on marriage. And so I really felt that after having received so much, it would have been only a coward who would have said no. And so I really felt like a special responsibility that maybe other people will not feel as keenly because of the fact that I was just at the right place at the right time around the right scholars, So that's why I have felt like I had to do something, because I fear for my soul if I didn't. All right. But I don't place the same burden on other people. But I do think everyone is called to courage in their own small way. Everybody has to examine their heart and say, okay, how can I grow in courage in this really small way today? Maybe I say something gently, kindly, and the thing that makes you more courageous, as Aristotle taught us, is to engage in small acts of courage, right? You become courageous by making yourself be courageous. The courageous person feels a lot of fear. It's not like the courageous person feels no fear. The courageous person feels fear and learns to move past it, to get a grip and face the fear and do what needs to be done. And then it gets easier and easier, and you can face greater and greater fears over time. But you do have to start small.
That's right. And thank God that you made that decision. And that's why I turned to you when I was facing the decision of launching Values First Therapy, whether to advertise my values. And you gave me some great encouragement, which helped me. And I was canceled 3 times in 1 week. And then I just got canceled again last week from a professional organization. But it's totally worth it. I mean,
it's worth it, right?
Yeah,
I remember, right? Because don't you feel like you get a friend upgrade? I mean, you do lose some friends. You lose some people. But I find that you gain the alliances and the friendships you gain. It's like a friend upgrade in the end, because by you being more honest and clear, other people come out of the woodwork suddenly because of your courage, right? I mean, I'm sure you could tell us stories, right, of like the positive that came from you being courageous.
Yeah, it's true. I think I'm still hoping for more positive, but yeah, so far it's been a net win, definitely. And you know what? At the end of the day, it doesn't really matter like whether there's a benefit from it. It's the right thing to do, right? I mean, this world is a very small place. I'm not doing it for this world in the end.
Yes.
So,
and life is short. Speak the truth.
Exactly. That's what it's about. So what projects are you most excited about now?
Oh my gosh. So right now I'm finishing a book with the Canavox state leaders called Courageous Conversations: Tips for Talking to Your Kids About Sexual Identity and Attraction. And we've been working on it for more than 2 years now. And I am literally in the final edits of this thing that has been so challenging to write because it is a very controversial topic. And it is very difficult for parents to talk to. This is like the big kahuna. I mean, kids are afraid. I mean, parents are afraid to talk to their kids about sex. Well, this is not simply talking to your kids about sex. This is talking to your kids about all the LGBTQ issues, what the purpose of sexual attraction even is. How do we manage and guide and properly direct our sexual feelings towards sexual integrity so that we can be happy in the end? Right? So it's a very loaded subject, and it's very challenging because parents don't want to, quote unquote, ruin their children's innocence. There are a lot of good parents who recoil at the idea of introducing topics to their children about, that they find repulsive or just deeply wrong, and so it requires a tremendous amount of prudence and peer review. I'm writing this book with about 45 other very well-formed people from all over the world, other parents, men, women, many different faith traditions as well. And we're articulating the natural law view of these things and getting all of these 45 personalities to all agree on this text has been very challenging. But I'm doing it this way. I'm writing it with them precisely because I want to be very sensitive to the most sensitive parents. Like I want all the biggest devil's advocates to be here writing this with me so that we can write a text that the most people can get behind. And we also have been writing it in consultation with academics and philosophers and, biologists and social scientists and all sorts of people, because this issue also is very interdisciplinary. It requires a firm handle on biology and quite a bit of psychology, actually, your field. So we've had psychologists among our state leaders who are also offering their expertise. So it's been I'm very excited about this book because I really want to help parents. I want to empower parents to talk to their children, to give them courage, to encourage, I want to encourage other people to do this because it's the way I think we're going to really turn this thing around and help the next generation and generations after them to not fall into these grave errors as a society. We need to create a culture teaching within the family that passes from generation to generation. This is like the greatest inheritance we can give our children, a truthful understanding of their sexuality and what their sexuality is for. So anyway, that is a very long-winded answer to your question of what's the most exciting thing I'm working on right now.
So Jesus said that the children of this world are wiser than in their own generation than are the children of light. Don't you feel like we're always a day late, a dollar short? Like we're addressing a problem now, and that book sounds awesome. I can't wait to see it. We're addressing a problem now that the other side's been like developing for decades, literally. And they're going to come up with something else. I don't know what they're going to come up with next, but they're going to come up with something right afterwards.
Yeah. Well, now I'm not speaking in my capacity as Canavox. I'm taking off my Canavox hat and putting on my Catholic woman hat. In the history of the church, the greatest heresies have always led to some of the greatest counsels and truths in the church, right? Often it's not until somebody stands up and really presents a big problem or a huge heretical challenge that we don't dig in and more fully understand what we believe. And I think this has been the case with marriage. I mean, I think we have this evolving understanding of what marriage is. Like we were told from the beginning what marriage is, right? Adam and Eve, they come together. But it's taken all the history of humanity to plunge more deeply into what the hell is this thing we call marriage, right? And I'm kind of grateful that we've had the LGBTQ movement come along and present this major secular heresy in order for us to scratch our heads and really figure out how to explain this to ourselves first and then to others. So I see it as a good thing. I mean, from an academic perspective, it's been a good thing. It's been an outstanding academic exercise. Of course, it's been a disastrous thing culturally, especially for children, right? Divorce and these other heresies have harmed the weakest of the weak, especially women and children, who are the most vulnerable and the ones who usually, I'm not saying men do not suffer, men greatly suffer when a culture does not understand what marriage is, but the most vulnerable, I think, are pregnant women and children. And so are they always a step ahead? Perhaps they are a step ahead. I do think that there is truth to that. And of course, and these heresies have been festering for quite some time. But I don't know, Johann. I mean, I think we human beings are these curious creatures. We grow soft when things are easy, and we grow strong when things are hard. And right now that things are so hard in the culture of marriage and in teaching our children about the truth of sexuality, I am seeing legions of good people. I mean, legions and legions and legions of creative, wonderful people rise up to this occasion and live their marriages heroically in a way that I'd be hard-pressed to say that they were living this way back in the good old days. I mean, I don't know that there's ever been a good old days for marriage. Marriage has always been fraught with injustice, indignity towards women, indignity towards children, injustices of all kinds. All right. There's nothing new under the sun. It's always been an embattled institution. But I think the days for marriage right now are very good because it is it is forcing people to bring out the best in themselves to fight for what they could see as a good thing.
That's a beautiful point to end on. Thank you so much, Anna.
Oh, you're welcome.